Before it had a scroll wheel, before it had a laser, before it had RGB lights, it was a pine block with 2 wheels and a cord, and it was about to change every desk in the world. In 1963, operating a computer meant feeding it a stack of punched cards, waiting hours for a result, and hoping the printout that came back wasn't full of errors. There was no screen to look at, no cursor to move. Douglas Engelbart was a researcher at the Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California. He had operated radar screens in World War II, and he never forgot how information could move on a display in real time. In 1962, he published a paper called Augmenting Human Intellect. His idea: computers should extend what the human mind can do, a continuous, fluid partnership between person and machine. To make that partnership work, you needed to point at things on a screen. Nothing available in 1963 did it well. Light pens were awkward. Joysticks were imprecise. Trackballs were exhausting to use for any length of time. Engelbart sketched a small device, 2 perpendicular wheels embedded in a wooden block. One tracked left and right, one tracked forward and back. Together, they mapped the movement of your hand to a position on a screen. Engineer Bill English took that sketch and built a working prototype around 1964. The casing was a small pine block, machined in the SRI workshop, with 1 button on top and a cord trailing off the back. Nobody gave it an official name. People in the lab started calling it the mouse because the cord looked like a tail. The name was never formally changed. For 5 years, Engelbart's team tested the device against every alternative they could find. In controlled experiments, the mouse was consistently faster, more accurate, and less physically tiring than anything else they evaluated. On December 9, 1968, Engelbart walked onto a stage at the Fall Joint Computer Conference in San Francisco, in front of roughly 1,000 engineers and scientists. In 90 minutes, he showed them video conferencing, hyperlinked documents, collaborative real-time editing, and live cursor control projected on a large screen driven by a wooden mouse. The audience gave him a standing ovation. But the computer industry in 1968 was selling mainframes to corporations. Almost nobody moved to build what Engelbart had shown. Personal, interactive computing still looked like science fiction to most of the field. Engelbart had filed a patent for the mouse in 1967. It was granted in 1970. SRI held the patent, not Engelbart personally. They licensed it widely but cheaply. The fortune the device would eventually generate went elsewhere. In 1970, Xerox opened the Palo Alto Research Center, PARC. They hired aggressively, pulling some of the best minds in computing, including someone who had worked directly on Engelbart's original device. Bill English moved to Xerox PARC and helped redesign the mouse for a new experimental computer called the Alto, a machine that would be, by almost any measure, the first modern personal computer. The Alto, completed in 1973, had windows, icons, a graphical desktop, and a mouse. It looked almost exactly like what we use today. Xerox built it and showed it to almost no one. Xerox never commercialized the Alto at scale. The company's leadership believed computers were for institutions, not individuals. The Alto stayed in research labs. One visit would change that. In December 1979, Steve Jobs toured Xerox PARC. Xerox showed him the Alto's graphical interface and mouse. Jobs later described it as seeing the future and immediately understood Apple had to build what Xerox was sitting on. Apple's Lisa launched in January 1983 with a graphical desktop and a mouse. The price was nearly $10,000. Almost nobody bought one. On January 24, 1984, the Macintosh launched at $2,495, mouse included. For millions of people, it was the first mouse they had ever touched. Inside the Mac mouse was a rubber ball. Rolling it across the desk turned two small rollers inside, one per axis, which sent position signals to the computer. It worked well enough, until it didn't. Microsoft had shipped a mouse for the IBM PC in 1983. Then Windows 3.1 in 1992 made a mouse effectively mandatory for every PC user in the world. The mass market had arrived. By the mid-1990s, manufacturers were producing an estimated 50 million mice a year. The pine block had become a plastic commodity, made in factories across Asia and shipped to desks worldwide. The rubber ball had one enemy, lint. Dust and fibers wrapped themselves around the rollers inside, and the cursor stuttered. Every few weeks, you unscrewed the bottom plate and picked out the grime by hand. In 1999, Microsoft released the IntelliMouse Optical, built with Agilent sensor technology. A tiny camera captured 1,500 images per second of the surface below and tracked movement between frames. No ball, no rollers, no lint. Through the 1990s, PC gaming became a mass market, Doom in '93, Quake in '96, Counter-Strike in 2000. Each game demanded faster, more precise mouse input than any Office task ever had. Competitive players discovered that the mouse's polling rate, how many times per second it reported its position, affected how smooth the cursor felt. A standard Office mouse polled at 125 Hz. Gamers wanted more. DPI measures how sensitive the mouse is to physical movement. Serious players became obsessive about their exact setting and treated it like an athlete's equipment, fixed, personal, and never touched before a match. Razer, founded in 1998, targeted gamers from the start. Logitech followed with dedicated gaming lines. By the mid-2000s, the gaming mouse was its own product category, with adjustable DPI, high polling rates, and swappable weights. By the 2010s, esports had become a billion-dollar industry. StarCraft professionals in South Korea were executing over 300 actions per minute. Counter-Strike teams competed for prize pools in the millions. Equipment choices mattered at the highest level. Competitive players rejected wireless for years. Early wireless mice had latency that was small but measurable in milliseconds, and in serious play, measurable meant unacceptable. The cable was considered a feature, not a limitation. Around 2019, Logitech's LIGHTSBED technology changed that. Wireless latency dropped to the point where professional players could no longer detect a difference from wired. The cable versus wireless debate finally began to settle. Today's top gaming mice poll at 8,000 Hz, reporting position 8,000 times per second. The gap between your hand moving and the cursor responding is less than 1/8 of a millisecond. Modern gaming mice have also shed weight obsessively. Some manufacturers drill honeycomb patterns into the plastic shell. The lightest competition mice today weigh under 50 grams, lighter than a golf ball, because in fast play, mass is resistance. Around 2004, laser sensors appeared in premium mice, offering greater surface precision. But many competitive players stayed on optical, arguing laser introduced subtle tracking inconsistencies at high speed. The debate between camps ran for years. The scroll wheel had arrived earlier, debuting on the Microsoft IntelliMouse in 1996. Before it, scrolling meant clicking a tiny arrow at the edge of a window. After it, nobody wanted to navigate any other way. When the iPhone launched in 2007 and the iPad followed in 2010, analysts widely predicted the mouse would be obsolete within a decade. Touch was the future, they said. It didn't happen. The mouse proved irreplaceable for anyone doing sustained precision work at a desk: design, code, editing, finance. Touch and mouse found separate domains and coexisted. They still do. Engelbart spent his later years frustrated. He had imagined computers as tools for solving civilization-scale problems. What the world mostly built instead, he felt, was a faster way to process paperwork. When the mouse patent expired in 1984, SRI had reportedly collected around $40,000 in total licensing fees. Engelbart received none of it personally. The commercial value eventually generated by the mouse ran into the billions. In 1997, Doug Engelbart received the ACM Turing Award, computing's highest honor. He was 72. He used the occasion to press the audience, once again, to use technology to tackle humanity's hardest problems. Engelbart died on July 2, 2013, at 88 years old. By then, an estimated 1 billion mice were in use around the world. Everyone descended from his pine block. Engelbart didn't just invent a pointing device. He invented the idea that a person and a computer could have a real-time conversation, immediate, continuous, and responsive to the movement of a human hand. From a pine block with 2 rolling wheels, to a rubber ball in molded plastic, to a camera shooting 1,500 frames a second, to a sensor polling at 8,000 hertz, the object changed completely. The purpose never did. Pick up any mouse today, gaming or office, wired or wireless, and your hand settles into the same basic grip humans have used since 1968. The hand hasn't changed. The mouse just got extraordinarily good at listening to it. This is Origins. Subscribe and come back tomorrow. There's a new origin every single morning.